I just want to say good morning to everyone. I appreciate your attending today. Um, we are going to have a very full agenda here with our two presenters. And hopefully you can all hang on because I think we're going to run a little over by 5 or 10 minutes or so, especially because I'd like to give you opportunity to ask questions. Just to remind you, we're AgeWise Colorado putting on this webinar. I'm Barbara Boyer, the Executive Director, and we're going to get this started right away with Kay Adams. Kay is a LCSW. She is a coach. She is an educator, a writer, a speaker. She is the founder of her company, Compassion Works, which is dedicated to providing individualized dementia coaching workshops and educational offerings to families, professional care partners, and organizations relative to dementia. She's passionate about supporting people living with dementia, and I can attest to that because I've talked to her. She's just fabulous. She has an extensive background as a medical social worker in geriatrics, hospice, palliative care, and mental health. So she has a very unique perspective as a bedside witness, which I will mention because she probably won't say it herself, is a book she's written. You can get it and read a little bit about it on our website under Books We Love, and it's a book well worth reading. And with that, I will stop. And Kay, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. Hello, everybody. So this is a workshop that I developed that's really mostly aimed at dementia care partners or caregivers, which is the bulk of my work in my coaching business, but also for professionals to kind of give you some insight to what your clients might be going through if they're caring for someone with dementia in their life, whether that's caring directly or indirectly, or they're just worried about somebody with cognitive change. So this is a shortened version of my usual workshop, no need to go alone. The emotional challenges of dementia caregiving and accepting help for the long journey. I was a hospice and palliative care social worker for 10 years. I worked 8 years plus at bedside in hospice, and all the different illnesses that I've been privy to be around as a medical social worker in 25 years. I really think the dementias are the hardest on relationships, the hardest on families, the most expensive, the most isolating for caregivers. I could go on and on and on, but that's why I really do a lot of education and support around folks that are caring for someone living with brain change or dementia in their life. So just a brief definition of dementia, because if I ask 25 people what their definition is, I'd get 25 different answers most of the time. So just a working definition for us all for today is when we think about dementia, it's a chronic or persistent disorder, and it's caused by one of two things, either a disease inside the brain or an injury to the brain, like falling off a ladder and getting a brain bleed, multiple concussions as a football player or boxer that years later, fast forward, turns into a dementia. Car accidents, domestic violence, blows to the head. So what people start to think now, because it's such a prevalent disease, is that it's a normal part of aging, and it's not, except that it's an epidemic. So it feels like everybody has dementia, and that's pretty much what I feel like, because I'm of the age that most of my mom just died last year, and she had dementia for 5 years. Most of my friends' parents, at least one, are dealing with brain change or dementia. So the older we get, the more we're around it, but it's still not a normal part of aging. It's caused by a brain disease or an injury to the brain. And really, the term dementia doesn't say a whole lot. It's just describing a group of symptoms of what part of the brain those symptoms are in and how they affect the person day-to-day living. So just saying dementia itself doesn't give us a whole bunch of information, and you'll see why in a second. This is a thing called the umbrella of dementia. It's just a tool to try to get people to understand it a little bit more. So for my education, I'm told that there's over 120 different kinds of dementias out there. That's a lot. 120 different kinds. The ones that are the most common under this umbrella of dementia are Alzheimer's disease, which we'll hear a little bit about more today. Young onset is before age 65 if someone's diagnosed. Late onset is after age 65. Vascular dementias are very common, usually related to strokes, to blood flow problems to the brain. And those can be game changers overnight. Someone's normal, fully functioning, independent, has a significant stroke, could be wheelchair bound, unable to communicate, have a severe dementia, and be 24/7 care the rest of their life, depending on the severity and where the stroke hits. Lewy body dementia is a common type that I'm not going to go into details today, but it involves a lot of changes in cognition, a lot of hallucinations, that kind of stuff. Robin Williams sort of brought that to the forefront of our awareness after his death. There's frontotemporal dementias that affect the frontal and temporal lobes. I would say Bruce Willis and his family have brought this to the attention because his primary progressive aphasia type of dementia that he's dying from right now is a form of frontotemporal dementia. And then there's all kinds of other things, Parkinson's related dementias, alcohol related dementias. The list is long, but let me just give you some simple things just to remember. So for whatever reason, when we talk about, we throw the word cancer around, all of us can somehow grasp what that means. You know, we say it might be in somebody's breast or bone or liver or ovaries or kidneys, but when we say the word cancer, we all know it's this disease cancer, right? But for whatever reason, when we say dementia, people say either or. They'll say, oh, my mom has Alzheimer's, but thank God she doesn't have dementia. Or my dad has dementia, but thank God it's not Alzheimer's. But it's one and the same. So it's like walking into a ice cream store and there's 31 flavors. They're all ice cream, right? It's just a matter of what flavor and what they've done to the brain. But just start noticing that language around you, that people will say, you know, they have dementia, but they don't have Alzheimer's. They have Alzheimer's, but they don't have dementia. And they're all in the same family. So of all the different kinds of dementias, Alzheimer's is the big hitter because it's a degenerative brain disease, meaning it gets worse over time. It's the most common cause of dementia that we know about right now. It's currently the 7th leading cause of death for anyone 65 and older in the US. 7th cause. Some years it's the 5th leading cause, some years it's the 6th, but it's consistently been in the top 10 for a long time. And we've known about this disease since 1906, guys. And no one's cracked the code yet. So it's a problem. So most people know that Alzheimer's disease can affect memory, but oftentimes people think that's where it ends. And it's not where it ends, not even close. It affects memory, people's ability to communicate, written language, verbal language, problem solving, executive functioning, sequencing tasks, shopping, balancing a checkbook, dressing themselves, feeding themselves, doing all those activities of daily living. And as the disease progresses over time, people become more and more dependent on their caregivers for all of those things that they can no longer do for themselves. And this is because these difficulties happen when nerve cells or neurons in parts of the brain that help us think and our cognitive function have been damaged or destroyed and ends up in brain failure. So I just cut right to the chase with this stuff because if people just think they're ready for a memory problem, they are not ready. They're just not ready. And I think the most compassionate thing to do is be honest about that. A few brief stats just to get you thinking. In the US, what do you think? Think to yourself, more than what number of people that are 65 and older right now are living with Alzheimer's? So Alzheimer's is one of 120 different kinds of dementias under the umbrella. 2.3 million, 4.5, 7.1, or 10.1. The answer is 7.1. So right now, 120 different kinds of dementias, and in just one of those categories, over 7 million people impacted in our country, 65 and older. By 2050, 24 years from now, what do you think that number is going to go up to? 13.8, 10 million, 15 million, or 9 million? 13.8, almost doubling in the next 25 years. And I can tell you, we do not have enough resources. We don't have enough people, caregivers, care facilities, money, anything to handle those numbers right now. In the US, what do you think? What number of people age 65 and older right now are just living with this one form of dementia, Alzheimer's? 1 of every 9, 3 of 20, 5 of 30, or none of the above? It's 1 of 9. I don't know about you, but I hang out in crowds of seniors all the time for my business. So I'm always doing this little mental exercise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, wondering how many people are living just with Alzheimer's in the room I'm in for any given occasion. It's kind of a scary thing. So when it comes to Alzheimer's, one of every 3 seniors dies from Alzheimer's or a different related dementia under that umbrella. 1 of 3 in the US. That's big. It kills more people than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. And in just 5 years, this is so alarming to me, this statistic. In just 5 years, we're going to need 1 million additional professional healthcare workers in order to care for the millions of people living with some form of dementia. 1 million. I'm not talking unpaid family members, not talking unpaid friends. 1 million additional staff. And if any of you happen to be out there in the world interacting with families dealing with dementia, you'll know that there's staff shortages everywhere, right? And these staff shortages happened far before COVID, and now they're worse than ever. And not to get political, but a lot of caregivers in our country in nursing homes, assisted living, memory care happen to be folks from different countries. A lot of them are immigrants, and a lot of those they're not able to do that anymore because of what's going on politically. So that is even more scary, how we're going to get enough people. If we need care, if our family needs care, who's going to do it? I have no idea. And the part that I kind of live for in my coaching business is this statistic. Nearly 20% of spousal caregivers die before their loved ones with the disease. Nearly 20%. 40% of caregivers report increased depression and stress related to caregiving burden. High levels of anxiety, high levels of substance abuse, a lot of suicidal ideation among caregivers. So that's really what gets me out of bed every morning, gets me working and trying to support all these people who really need it so they aren't the next ones to lose their lives. One of the things that is so hard about dementia is that people lose the ability to have any insight or awareness about what is happening to them. So even in the beginning stages of a dementia, about half of the people have no idea anything's happening to their brain. They can't see it no matter what you do, no matter what you say. They literally cannot see the changes within themselves. Of the other half of them that are aware, they feel like their brain's been hijacked. They can't figure out why they're constantly looking for their car keys, their wallet, their purse, why they forget where they parked in the parking lot, those kinds of things. They start getting anxious or angry or worried. They feel like, I hear them all the time saying, I feel like I'm losing my mind and I don't know why. So there's a Greek term to describe this phenomenon. It's called anosognosia. And it translates as having no knowledge of the disease. Having no knowledge of the disease. So PLWD stands for people living with dementia. So in people living with dementia, it's this inability to recognize or acknowledge their cognitive impairment. It's a brain thing. So it's being unaware of the changes in their memory, in their thinking, and their functional abilities. And this is where it causes a great deal of friction and conflict within families. My mom had dementia the last 5 years of her life. It was more of took the form of delusions and paranoia than memory loss. But she had no idea it was happening to her brain. She thought she was just fine, good as gold, and she absolutely was not. And there was no convincing her otherwise. So I compare it a lot to like someone with an addiction. Maybe everybody around that person knows that so-and-so is an alcoholic, but they say, oh, I could quit any day. I don't have a problem, right? Or somebody with a severe eating disorder. Maybe at baseline, they should weigh 150 pounds and they weigh 75. And when they look in the mirror, they think they're fat. It's a brain thing. And I always like to take an opportunity quick here to talk about the difference between anosognosia and denial, because I would not be with you guys today if I had a nickel for every time I hear the word denial. I'd be on an island somewhere with an umbrella drink because it just comes up so much. Okay. So if I'm in denial, if I feel a lump in my breast and I go to the doctor and I'm like, I'm really concerned about this, and they do a workup, they do a biopsy, they send it in, and they call me back in and say, we're really concerned about this. We think it's an aggressive cancer. We want to start with double mastectomy and chemo and radiation and all this stuff, right? And they send me home with all the paperwork. And I come home and I stick that paperwork in my desk drawer. And I lock it away in there. I don't tell my family. I don't tell my friends. And I put that information back here. That's denial. I'm shoving it away. Okay. In order to deny something, you first have to acknowledge it on some level. But this is different with anosognosia. You could videotape the person with dementia, at, taking the rearview mirror off the car and play them the video, and they'd swear it wasn't them. It's a brain thing. So it makes it very difficult in families. And it can have a profound impact on relationships as a result. Excuse my French, but I refer to dementia as a shit show. It just really is, because unlike other illnesses, all these other illnesses, cancer, lung disease, heart disease, Parkinson's disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, you name it, that I've worked with as a medical social worker, if people still have their brain intact and other parts of their body are dying, it is a whole different animal as a caregiver than a dementia that affects the brain so much. And it really undermines relationships in a kind of heartbreaking fashion. I'm a dog nut, so just pre-warning, I have a lot of dog slides in here. So some of the difficult emotions that the care partner, I work with people in about 35 states, 2 countries right now. In my coaching business, I have about 20 people, 20 different countries attending my classes online, because dementia knows no geographical borders. And I hear the same stuff over and over from everybody. So some of the emotions that are most challenging for care partners to deal with are guilt and remorse. And part of that is because if you've been up close and personal to someone with brain change or dementia, especially with that short-term memory change, and they ask you the same question 25 times in 15 minutes, and they tell you the same stories over and over, and that kind of stuff, times 7 years of that, you don't have a lot of patience. You don't have a lot of extra gas in your tank. You're drained. And so oftentimes, I'm dealing with people saying how guilty they feel because they should be perfect. They should be patient 24/7, just like the Mother's Day cards say we should be as women or whatever, but we just literally can't do it. So there's a lot of guilt and remorse that happens. There's a lot of sadness and grief and depression that care partners deal with. Part of that is anticipatory grief. They're grieving for the person, they're losing them in chunks over years. So they're grieving far before there's ever a death loss. They're grieving all the way along. And it's really hard. And there's this other concept called ambiguous loss, where the person is still there sitting next to them, but maybe they don't even recognize them as their child or spouse or brother or sister any longer. So they're still here, but they're in their own bubble caused by the dementia. And other people might say to them, "Oh, you're so lucky you still have your brother or your mom or your partner. Mine died last year. You're so lucky you still have yours." And they might be thinking, "You should spend 24 hours under my roof and you would know I don't feel lucky." That would not be one word that I would use to describe my current situation, right? And the other thing, they get angry. A lot of people save their whole life for their golden years. We're going to go travel. We're going to do these things. I just worked with a new client 2 days ago. She's only been married, second marriage, 3 years. Husband's 55 with early onset Alzheimer's disease. 3 years. Already he had to quit. He had a CEO job. He couldn't do his job. He's already needing help, day-to-day help. 3 years into a new marriage, 55 years old. She's pissed. She's like, "Wait, I thought this was the love of my life. This was the perfect relationship, and now look what's going to happen." So anger is common. Being overwhelmed. Everybody I work with is overwhelmed. It just varies how much they're overwhelmed on any given day, because this disease keeps morphing and changing and marching on over time. There's a lot of resentment I deal with families. So I might deal in my coaching business. Everything I do on coaching is Zoom, by the way, almost exclusively, so people can live anywhere in the world. Resentment. There might be 5 kids in the family. It's usually on one person's shoulder, usually the daughter, is what happens a lot. And the other 4 siblings are pointing fingers. You have a lot of judgment about the primary caregiver daughter, what she's doing, but they're not showing up to help, right? So there's tons of resentment that goes with this work. The fear and loneliness. I do not know, honest to God, a more isolated group of people on the planet than dementia care partners, and especially during COVID. Oh my Lord, because there was no day programs. There was no PT, OT, anybody coming in the house. There was nobody to help. And that fear and loneliness really was a big deal for folks. So I already mentioned this anticipatory grief thing, but it's really important if you are supporting any caregiver in your life or somebody living with dementia. This is very real. It's the emotional pain and sadness that arises far, far years in advance of a death. But we, I think, live in a very death-denying culture. I will say that to you after 8.5 years of hospice and a year and a half of palliative care. We'd rather talk about Botox than we would about the fact that we're all going to die. And people think that we only grieve after something's happened, after a divorce, after a death, after the last kid has moved out. But that's not how we're wired. We're wired to grieve all the way along. So the caregivers, though, if people don't understand this disease, they don't understand that they're grieving, and people don't know how to support them. And it's so important that we learn those skills. Ambiguous loss, I mentioned, interacting with someone who is not fully present socially or psychologically, they're checked out. One of my coaching clients I've worked with for a couple of years, she lives down in Castle Rock. She had to move her husband in assisted living last year. He has Alzheimer's. And she describes herself as a half widow. I'm a half widow. I don't have a husband in the house anymore, but I'm still married. I have my best friend I no longer have. My working partner of 60 years I no longer have. And the friends of 40 years, our friends as a couple, aren't showing up, and they live a mile away. No one's calling me, no one's texting me, no one's inviting me out to dinner, no one's asking how I'm doing. And it adds to that isolation and that invalidation experience for caregivers. So because a dementia is caused by an injury to the brain or disease inside the brain, and our brains control everything, dementia has the potential to change everything. But just so you know, it is not something that a person can control, but it will vary from day to day. Some days they can do stuff really well if you ask them to do it. And the next day, if you ask them to do that same task, like unloading the dishwasher, they may stare at you with this blank look and have no idea what you're talking about. It varies, it vacillates, it's always changing. So it's very confusing for the caregiver brain to understand that. And what ends up happening is we default to thinking they're just being lazy, they're just being manipulative, they just want me to do everything. And then we feel more resentful and angry, right, ourselves as caregivers. It's also not the same for every person. So if you had 100 women age 75 with Alzheimer's disease, each and every one of their journeys is individual. It's not the same. There'll be a lot of commonalities, there'll be a lot of overlap in the symptoms and some of the things that happen, but every single person goes through it differently. So if you had a grandma that had vascular dementia and now your husband has vascular dementia, it may look completely different. So if you know one person living with dementia inside their head, you know one person. We can't generalize from person to person. It's not a mental illness, but there's still all kinds of stigma around it, which is heartbreaking. But what we know absolutely unequivocally is it's very real and it is very hard at times. So what I work with people a lot around is perspective, how we look at situations. So perspective, what you see depends not only on what you look at, but also the perspective of where you're looking from. And that makes a big difference. I use this is not a dementia related example, but I had just started in hospice in the fall of 2001 as a hospice social worker, having zero experience in end of life care. I'd never been around anybody who was dying. All my patients lived in nursing homes, assisted livings, and memory care. Besides my maternal grandparents, I'd never been around anybody with dementia. So it was a shock, to say the least. 6 weeks into that job, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer and died 6 months later. I can tell you for sure that did not feel like a gift to me at the time. Absolutely turned me upside down for a good year. But now, fast forward all these years, he died in 2002. All these years later, I can see what a gift it was that when he died at home. When he died, he had his family around. When he died, he knew who all of us were. When he died, he was still dad. We didn't lose him in chunks, only pound-wise due to the cancer. But he was still intact and dad. My mom was very different. Her experience with dementia was a very different thing for 5 years and our loss of her than dad. So the perspective, and I'm also grateful in a way that my mom had dementia because it gives me an insider track what everybody I'm supporting is working with. And I don't know exactly what they're going through, but I have a lot better sense of it because of these really innate, personal, up close perspectives I've gained through my work and through my family experience. So dad was my greatest teacher. So what are some helpful tools to communicate with people who are living with brain change and dementia if you run across those folks in your work? Some very simple things are match your pace to theirs. I have a class, if you look on my website, I do a class almost every month called More Than Memory, Understanding Brain Change and Dementia from the Inside Out. It's sponsored, so it's free to the public. It's 90 minutes, and I go through in depth all kinds of brain changes that I can't do today. But one of the things that happens with all kinds of dementias is it attacks the language centers of the brain in the left temporal lobe. And so people lose the ability. They start with word finding problems. They can't think of nouns, of names of things, including family names sometimes. They're having a really hard time understanding what you're saying. We're using too many words with them now because different parts of their brains are dying over time. So we have to learn how to slow our cadence of speech, have more rhythmic speech, check for understanding, less words, simpler sentences, and then saying, okay, Dorothy, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Can you tell me what you just heard me say? And when you do that, you're going to see the gaps that they just missed, especially if they're at least mid-stage dementia or going forward. And then, practice using longer pauses, rhythmic speech to improve communication. And we are a society that we're always in a hurry. We're rush, 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 rush. How much can we get done? How much can we pack in? And we don't pause very well. We don't take a beat very well. But with folks living with brain change and dementia, they need us to take that beat. They need us to slow down. They need us to pause. And does that feel uncomfortable, that silence? Because we don't do it, right? But this is what we have to learn in the land of dementia. More reflective listening. If the person with dementia struggles with word finding, rather than just jumping in automatically and trying to add to what they say, learning to repeat back what you heard them say, which can kind of help prompt their brain so they can, oh, I said that so far, and here's what I want to say with the rest of the conversation. But because we tend to be impatient, all of us, caregivers, family caregivers, or others, we just want to get that sentence out and help them, so they're not struggling. It makes us uncomfortable when they're struggling. But we need to let them try as much as they can and bridge that gap in a gentle way for them. So if someone with dementia says, I'm looking for something to can't remember, right? Can't remember. It's like, instead of just jumping in, just say, okay, so you're looking for something, right? You're reminding them what they just said. You're looking for something so you could what? And see if they can fill in the blank. Oh, so I can cut up these vegetables, or whatever. You're trying to work with them and give them a little time and prompt so their brain might be able to remember before you just automatically jump in. A nice little phrase to say to folks is it this or something else? Are you looking for your phone or is it something else? No, it's not that, it's something else. So often I think the caregivers of the world live in a long extended game of charades, constantly trying to guess what the person with dementia is trying to communicate, which is very exhausting for their brains, to say the least. But this is a nice little phrase to try to prompt memory without shaming somebody. Another one is tell me more about it. If you're still unsure what the person with dementia is saying, just say, well, can you tell me more about it? Is it something that you need or something that you want? Is it something in the house or something outside? It's so trying to get a little simple prompts to see if they can tell you more about it. It's the thing you put in the thing so you can go. Oh, your keys. Yes. Right? That kind of thing. So what you're really asking is, do you have other words for what you could use aside from the ones you're looking for? Can you tell me more about it? If they use other words to talk around the word they can't think of, you can then try to help a little bit. It can help you figure out what they're trying to communicate. So, and we all do this thing where, like, I remember last summer saying to my son, where is the thing that goes around the edge of the lawn, to get the weeds around the edge? I could not for the life of me think of the word weed whacker to save me. Right. So I was talking around it. It's the thing you go around the yard with to do the thing. I was like, wide circle, get in here. And then he's like, oh, you mean the weed whacker, Mom? I'm like, yes, that's it. But people with dementia will do this a lot. They cannot come up with that word or that phrase. And so it's a long route to get there. And we often, the general collective, we get impatient. So we want to jump the gun and fill in the blanks and all that kind of stuff. And that tends to frustrate people and make them not feel so great about themselves. Other thing to do is to use visual cues. So I don't know if you can see this, I have a glass of water here. If I had somebody with dementia sitting next to me and they had a glass of water in front of them and I did this, then I pointed to their glass of water and did that, guess what? I bet you they'd take a sip of water without me saying a single word, right? So there are ways to use visual cues and way less language with folks to help them as their brain changes progress over time. That's, again, a lot what I do in my classes, a lot what I do with my individual coaching clients, is help them learn different tools to communicate with their loved ones with dementia. Another thing is just to use clear and simple language. Use short, simple sentences and words, not run on, not changing the topic 10 times in a 3-minute period when you're talking, avoiding jargon, abbreviations, or complex concepts as things progress. And if they don't understand, rephrase what you said or try to use different words until they seem to kind of get it, if they can. There's going to be times or years even where people lose that ability to understand what we're saying almost completely. But there's lots of things we can do in the meantime to try to be as successful as we can in communication. And then asking yes or no questions. That helps a lot. Would you like this or not? Or just, sometimes just giving 2 choices. Do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? Not putting out 10 shirts on the bed and having them choose. That's too many. It's too overwhelming. Nonverbal communication speaks volumes. So making eye contact with the person. If you take my class, you'll learn about all the visual changes that happen with dementia, and peripheral vision changes really narrows the vision, depth perception changes. So we want to make sure that they can see us, because the main way most of us take in data from the environment is first through our eyes and second through our ears. So if they can see us, they have a better chance of trying to understand what we're saying. Be mindful of your body language and facial expressions, because they may pick up on the fact that you're pissed or frustrated, but have zero idea why that is. And then also just using gentle touch, holding hands, putting a hand on their shoulder, those kinds of things, just to kind of ground them. That's always helpful. And then just be mindful of the environment if you're trying to communicate with someone with dementia. The less stimulation around, the quieter it is, the less busy, chaotic it is, the more successful you're going to be with communicating. Folks get overwhelmed in crowds, in loud restaurants, in situations with lots of people. It can make them agitated and overwhelmed. And so if you can try to approach them in a calm environment or take them aside to a room or something like that, chances are you're going to be a lot more successful than if you're trying to talk to them in a room full of 30 people. Patience and understanding. Practice patience and understandings when it takes the person with dementia longer to respond. And this is hard because, again, we tend to always be in a hurry and we're always in a rush. But just trying to learn to not always interrupt or to talk over people or to rush them. Because when you think about yourself, when someone's talking over you or interrupting you or rushing you, you don't think as well, right? And you don't like it. You don't like the feel of that. And neither do folks with dementia. If they become frustrated or agitated, just try to validate what might be going on for them. And if you start getting frustrated, I'm always saying this to caregivers, take a time out, walk away, take a beat, go outside for 5 minutes, do some primal scream therapy, whatever you need to do to reset yourself so you can come back in and try again and not have such an elevated level, being angry or whatever's triggering you at the time. And then accept blame when something's wrong, even if it's not sometimes. I'm just saying, I'm so sorry this is going on for you. I'm so sorry this is so hard. I can tell you're trying to communicate with me and I don't understand what you're saying right now. And I'm so sorry about that. I wish I did. Things like that. Using what you know. So using the person's interests and preferences to guide conversations and activities. So this is really important about knowing something about their history, what they did for a career, about their family, about their interests, that kind of stuff. Encourage them to stay engaged in activities they enjoy, even if they're simple. So one of my clients, her husband he has Lewy body dementia. He used to do like 1,000-piece puzzles. He was a puzzle master. Now he's down to doing 20-piece puzzles, but he still likes doing puzzles. It's still the activity. It's just on a way simpler scale. So focusing on what they can still do and nurture those abilities so they, use it or lose it. But you just have to adapt what they can do over time as the disease progresses and they aren't able to do what they once could do 6 months ago, a year ago, or 2 years ago. And then I'm always talking to caregivers about the importance of maintaining their own well-being, which is easier said than done, especially for dementia care partners. So some of the things I'm always talking about is, trying to tune out the unproductive worrying, worrying about everything that could possibly happen. When any of us do that, I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like we're living in a very chaotic time in the world, full of fear, full of division, full of worry, stress, really scary wars going on, and all of that. And I can go down a rabbit trail really quickly if I watch too much news or something and start regretting that I had brought a teenager into the world in this craziness. But that's not helpful. It's way better for me to turn off the TV, get together with a friend, go for a walk in nature, and not let myself go on that runaway train. And that's true for caregivers. So trying to differentiate how much of the worrying is productive, like having enough food in the house versus staying up all night thinking about worst case scenarios that can happen. And this happens all the time in my world working with caregivers. They're always worrying and fretting about what could come next. I love this one. Have you seen the dog meditating? So trying to help them to try to practice mindfulness, just being in the moment, noticing your breath, feeling the ground under you. When you are just doing one thing at a time, you can't be worrying about the past and you can't be worrying about the future. And I think for all of us, we could learn something for this, especially in this time that we're living. So to hone that skill, just, practicing and just, a minute a day, 2 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day of just trying to stay centered, trying to stay grounded, because I think anxiety is like a disease of the future. And that can really take us down some roads we don't want to go. Develop habits and routines for better control. That's important for everybody. So I'm always encouraging folks to put stuff on their calendar, to make it happen, to go to the gym, to meet with a friend, to do things like that. If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't happen. All right, focusing on gratitude. Even if it feels like you don't have a lot to be grateful for that day, we know from science that focusing on gratitude can help us all. Not on what we don't have, but focus on what we do. Seeking out humor is really important. I get through my days by watching reels on Facebook or comedians or things like that, so I can laugh. Those feel-good endorphins are healing for our brains. So seeking out humor whenever you can. Don't rely on temporary distractions like alcohol, drugs, gambling, scrolling through Facebook for 10 hours a day. We have to ground ourselves in reality and not just try to numb out and not pay attention to what's going on. I love this slide. Accept what you can and can't control. This is a big deal I work with caregivers. If someone has a dementia at this point in time, any of those 120 different kinds of dementias under the umbrella are considered terminal at this point. We do not have a cure for any of them. So you can't control that the person may lose their life to this, but you can control how you live your days. I'm always encouraging people not to put all their eggs in one basket. Don't try to do it all by yourself. Try to get other people to help you along the way and celebrate what you had and what you still have. With my mom, I didn't have the same relationship with her the last 5 years, but I still had her there. She was still my best friend. She was still my greatest champion. She just wasn't quite the same as she'd been before. And I'm always saying to people, find your tribe. When it comes to dementia, they have to find people that can relate to them. They have to find people that understand the shoes they're walking in and their journey, which is not the same if there's 9 other caregivers on the block that are caring for someone with a disease that doesn't affect their brain. It's completely different experience for them. So I'm always saying to folks, you got to find your tribe. And learning to ask for and accept help. I beat this drum every single session, every single class, every single keynote I do. Asking for help is a sign of strength and not weakness. And we live in a culture that doesn't really buy that, but I think it's very true, especially in this instance with caregiving for dementia. Um, so asking and accepting for help for the long haul is very important. Building a care team early on. I'm going to be doing a workshop in a month or two about this very topic. If you get on my email list, you'll find out about that, and you'll get more information on that. If you don't know about these websites, these are a couple good websites to refer people to. They're free calendar websites to help people, other people sign up to, I'll come walk your dog, I'll deliver a meal for you, I'll come sit with your wife while you go to the gym for 2 hours, that kind of stuff. Caringbridge.org, lots of helpinghands.org. Those are really good resources. I love this quote: be strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to know when you need help, and brave enough to ask for it. So an ending perspective. What you see depends not only on what you look at, but also where you look from. And I'm always trying to help people change their perspective to a positive whenever possible. And end with this quote: dementia, and perhaps life itself, is best approached not by trying to change minds or challenging another person's reality, but by striving to understand a mind, to see it in context, to reckon with its contradictions, and simply let that mind know that it is worth knowing. The smallest change in perspective can change and transform a life. So, what tiny attitude adjustment might just turn your world around? All right, so that's what I have for today. This is my contact information. All you really need to know is my website, k@kmadams.com. If you forget the M, you'll go somewhere else on the web. So k@kmadams.com. And I am going to stop sharing now.
Hey, thank you so much. A lot of good information. And it's good we're recording this because you can all go back and review it. Really appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
And if everyone can hang on, we're going to go talk with Cory and Michelle now. But maybe we can have time after when we're supposed to end to do questions if there
I
are
can stay
any.
on a little longer. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So we're going to have Cory and Michelle. Cory and Michelle are both co-founders of Above and Beyond Senior Living. Cory is also a licensed assisted living administrator with more than a decade of hands-on experience in senior care. He is a certified Alzheimer's disease dementia care trainer and combines his operational experience with a deep commitment to helping families navigate senior living decisions with compassion and clarity. And Michelle, his partner, is also a certified dementia practitioner with more than 30 years of experience in senior care. She has been both clinical and executive level leadership in her roles across assisted living, hospice, home health, and long-term care. And she is now specializing in dementia care and helping to guide families, again, like Cory, through senior living decisions. And both of them, with all of this wonderful experience, have great expertise and compassion. And with that, I will turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Barb.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's tough act to follow. We didn't have much slideshow or anything prepared for you guys, but we have led some teams of caregivers on the community level in both assisted living, where you're kind of getting those early stages, all the way through to memory care, where you're kind of dealing with the end stages. And it is certainly a challenging task, that these caregivers are faced with. Um, and there's such a gap in education when it comes to these. We are constantly looking at communities that continue doing like ongoing education with their residents because, when you get onboarded and you get your 2 days worth of training and it's all on video and you don't remember anything that gets said, that's it's not effective dementia care. Effective dementia care really, it takes all components. It takes family, if they're at a community level, it takes involvement with the community, involvement with your physicians, your neurologist, any kind of therapy teams you might have involved. It really does take a village to perform successful dementia care, and continuing doing like workshops like these, educating yourselves on how to best communicate. Oftentimes, when I see families that are new and not have any experience with dementia care, there's typically some outliers, things that I can hear now that kind of just perk my ear as soon as I hear them. Like um not to say arguing, but like the frustration, if somebody, I've told you this 1,000 times, don't you remember this, things like that. I mean, I've heard staff members say that to residents in memory care, don't you remember? And it's like, no, they don't remember. I mean, that's why they're in this community, and that's why we're seeking help. So I think, we spoke earlier kind of about staying grounded in yourself, and I think that's so true when it comes to dementia care, because it's so easy to approach somebody when you have a million things on your mind and you just need a quick little, hey, this is what I need, boom, and be done with it. That's not, again, not effective dementia care. We need to approach centered and, allow them the time to articulate their responses, help them out if need be. But again, you don't want to spoon feed them the answer either. These are capable human beings who have lived their entire lives. Oftentimes at a community level, that's what I had to remind my caregivers is we get these people at the tail end of their lives. And they lived full lives, probably had more success than we have in their lives, raised families, things like that. Um, and now we're getting them for this little slice. So just be cognitive of the person behind the disease. It's not it's not them, it is the disease, and it's the disease progression that's kind of changing the way that they can articulate and respond to things. Um, yeah, Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean it's hard. I mean, you covered so much information and did it marvelously. So it's hard, I concur with Cory. That's a little bit hard to piggyback off of that. I think the biggest thing, and we often say it because we as well will go around and still do communicate communities education and family members educations. It's tough when we're coming into some of these homes with the strong push of everybody should stay at home. Recently our trends that we're be seeing is we get into these homes to help somebody and we're getting that call and it's, I think mom could do okay in independent living. She's living home alone right now. And we get in there and the next thing we know, they're saying, "Oh, mom, we've canceled now 3 visits with you coming out because mom's stomach's just not feeling too well." And we get out there and lo and behold, we start doing some home assessments and figuring some things out. One of our favorite things that we say in all of our dementia certification courses that we offer is you are going to be a detective. And if you're not that detective, well, you're probably doing things wrong. One of my soapboxes is the word behaviors. I often get on that and say that's a term that I personally don't like. It's a way of communication. We create those behaviors typically because we're not understanding what they're trying to say to us. So, we get into those homes, and these poor family members think that, mom or dad or aunt, uncle are being defiant and they don't want to do things. And, the hell no, I won't go scenario type thing. And next thing we get in there, and, the food in the deep freezer has been unplugged for 3 years and nobody knew, but that's where the Meals on Wheels were going for this particular lady. And then she would go once she finished what was in her refrigerator and pull it out of the deep freezer and she would eat it. And then, of course, that is why she got an upset stomach. So, there's just those pieces. And then, the regret that the family members go through when that stuff shines to light, that they missed that component. They take it very, very personable. And again, as an adult child, who thinks to go through mom or dad's deep freezer to make sure that, we're taught we don't snoop in our parents' homes. So now we're up telling everybody snoop through these homes, see what's going on, be the detective and get the support that they need. And I think the biggest thing that, if I could say anything, is the stress on the family members. I think even when being community based, getting the staff to understand that what they're going through, that's a whole other process and a much harder process at times because it's personal. As an adult daughter, I can only imagine, being close to a parent, and then it's hard enough when we lose that parent, but then to still be the caretaker for that parent. And now we've also lost who we confide in, who we went to when we went through different stages in our lives. They get robbed of those stages. So now the adult daughter, maybe for basic things that we don't even think about, maybe the adult daughter now cannot talk to her mother about what menopause is going to feel like. Where's she supposed to get that information in the tech world that we now live in? That some's true, some's false, but there's no personal. If they're not connected and they have a lot of friends, where's that information coming from? There's no personal connections that we're pushing for these individuals. So the biggest thing that is to support them. It's more than just the individual living with the disease. It's that entire family dynamic that supports that person that we've got to get better at.
Yeah, and often when we go into a home, we can kind of, because we've been doing it for so long, we could kind of identify, you know, when we go in, we do, because we help people find homes in assisted living is what our company does, memory cares and things like that. So we, with Michelle, her background is she's a nurse as well. And we've helped a ton of families just get into assisted livings, things like that. So we really dove in when we started this business into comprehensive assessments for the individual. And oftentimes if we go into a house and we notice that there's some kind of cognitive situation going on, we can kind of gear that assessment more towards that so that we're making sure that that person is getting the correct level of care, and not going to an independent living when truly, it might be time for a memory care at that point. And oftentimes during these visits, we're also counseling the caregivers, the family, the adult children. There's been so many people, and Michelle kind of touched on the grief and the regret and things like that. But oftentimes, when we move somebody into a memory care, we tell them, hey, it's going to take a little bit to not only for your loved one to adjust, but for you to adjust. And then when we check back with them, 30, 60 days later, mom's putting on weight because she's getting an appropriate diet now. They're happier because they're getting socialization. And now the children, the spouse, they go from caregiver back to the child, the spouse. I mean, when you're dealing with end stage dementia, are you having necessarily those deep conversations at that point? Probably not, but being in the moment and being able to enjoy the presence of that individual again, yeah, it really makes a huge difference as opposed to constantly being worried about what's wrong, what can I do, and things like that. Um, some things also that families have came to us for is just respite. So what a respite is if you have to go on vacation, but maybe mom and dad need a little support, we can actually get them off to a community for a short period of time while you're on vacation or dealing with whatever you have to deal with, and then they come back. Also partnering with different people coming into the home, if they're at a stage where maybe they just need some medication reminders, things like that. There are companies out there that provide those types of services. I know AgeWise has a huge directory of different things. I'm sure any need that you might have is probably on there. Um, and yeah, I mean, just again, trying to be centered and center your thoughts before you approach an individual. I would encourage you, if you have not, take a virtual dementia experience course. And, at the end of it, I've worked in memory cares with people with pretty aggressive type of, Michelle hates behaviors, but behaviors, where they're kind of getting into fights and, you're scared to turn your back on them. And after doing that dementia experience, they put you in a room, you kind of have blinders on, you have things in your ears, it's dark, you have things on your hands, things in your feet. I mean, it's just overstimulation to the max. And then at the end of it, they come up beside you and they tap you on the shoulder. And when they did that, instantly in my brain, it clicked of like, whoa, I can see how somebody with dementia would turn around and want to hit somebody when you have all this going on, and then all of a sudden somebody's grabbing onto your shoulder. So, another key piece of communication is to make sure, oftentimes when you have occipital lobe problems, with dementia, you kind of things start to narrow in on you like this as well. So if we're coming up from somebody on their side, that's going to oftentimes create a behavior because they don't know who you are. They don't know where you're coming from. So it's always better just to approach directly and, face to face. So then that way they can see you, they can see your intentions. I'm one of those people that kind of like wears my emotions on my face a little bit, probably to my detriment at some points. But if you can come up centered and approach them directly, yeah, oftentimes you'll have some better results. And there is a little bit of give and take, little games, that we have to play sometimes. Like when I work with caregivers and they say, "Do you want to go shower today?" Well, no, I don't want to go shower. Okay, see you later. Bye. Meanwhile, that person hasn't showered in 2 weeks because, it's at a certain point, you're kind of beyond asking and you're there to help guide them. So, hey, let's go get in the shower. Hey, let's go to this meal. Let's go to this activity. Those sort of things. And we're not lecturing them, we're not saying you need to take a shower because X, Y, and Z. We're just reassuring them of the outcome. Hey, let's just go get clean. Let's go take a shower and we'll be done with it. And we'll, watch TV, things like that. There's different little redirections that we as caregivers can do. And also, living in their world, that's another thing I worked with my caregivers on. Oftentimes, especially when somebody first moves into a community, you would see them trying to pack their belongings, walking around, pacing a lot, trying to leave, things like that. It's all completely natural. It's all, a natural part of what's going to happen. And just living in that world, if somebody is trying to say, well, I need to go home because the kids need taken care of. Well, we got a babysitter. You're okay for right now. It is a little light white lie to some extent, but also it's better than, well, your kids are an adult and you're living in a memory care. I mean, reorienting them is going to more often than not cause a type of behavior that we're not looking for. So it's better just to live in their world, offer reassurance, offer guidance, and also knowing when to step in and kind of take the reins and not, hey, you want to shower? Well, no, I don't. Okay, that's one of my favorites that I'll see with caregivers.
Does anyone have any questions for any of our speakers? I mean, I think this has been fabulous information. Kay, I have a question for you. What do you think of that simulation program? I've heard a lot about it, and it sounds like it would be
The virtual dementia experience.
Yeah, a scary one, but really gives someone, a family member, especially, a better understanding of what it's like.
I've
Like
only done
Cory
it once. It
was
was years
saying.
ago. It was like probably before COVID that I did it, and it was impactful. It's so weird. And then you have those
Mhm.
headphones on, you have the music going
People
on, and
laughing in your ear.
you got these things in your shoes so your gait is off, and you got these things on your hands so you don't feel stuff the same, and you can't see what's going on, and you're asked to do tasks like find this in the cupboard, and and it feels like you are going to lose your complete mind.
Mhm.
And I think that I like anything that's kind of really hits people on an emotional level. all this intellectual stuff doesn't hit people very much. I think, we just gotta, I'm always trying to get people to feel something at a visceral level. And I think that those virtual things do that. It's like, are you kidding? And I think families should do it. And I feel like every staff person on earth who works with anybody with dementia should have to take it 10 times or monthly or something to remember what's going on with the person, because they don't look that impaired often. You don't know all the stuff that's reeling around that they're trying to deal with coming at their brain that's dying and they can't figure it out. So I think it's very impactful.
I think it's actually something, Barbara, that would be beneficial to do more than once, because I don't even think, even with us, that we would have the same experience the second time. My very first time, my first experience, I did not hear the directions. So I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing. I just had all these weird noises going on in my head and saw these objects. I didn't know anybody was in the room with me at all at that time. And I just started basically playing. I was an only child, so I'm very good at self-entertaining myself. And I get out, and my other two owners they're like, "Well, there was this, and you were supposed to." I said, "Huh?" I said, I just went over to the bed and started folding clothes. I didn't know what to do. So I did not get the experience that they got. Their experience was a lot more rewarding, whereas I just went and self-entertained. So I think that it's something that has to be done multiple times because we have our own deficits. I'm hard of hearing. So when soon as she put those earmuffs on, even though there was no volume in them, I had no idea what she said. Just clueless.
Yeah.
I'll go play.
I
But
have
Yeah.
I have another question for the three of you. If there was one piece of advice you could give, especially a family caregiver, as far as keep this in mind as your top priority in dealing with mom or your spouse or whatever, what would that be? Is it remember compassion? Is it remember to take a break? What would you say?
I would say find your tribe, find a support system, find other people, because I use this example a lot. If there's 10 houses on a block and there's one person in every house who's a caregiver, but only one person caregiving for someone with a dementia out of 10, those other 9 neighbors are going to try to give you well-meaning advice that's going to fall flat and does not apply to your situation. And then you feel so misunderstood, invalidated, invisible, and worse than you did before. So I just think you got to find people that can support you. And the other thing I say all the time, non-judgmental zone.
yes.
Not so when people say to me, some days I just wish he was dead. I don't know how longer I can do this. And I go, oh, absolutely. That is a normal thought in this situation. But they're waiting for lightning to strike, but it's just like not judging. I don't know what your experience is like. Help me understand what a day in the life of your life is like. So not coming in with judgment, coming in with beginner's mind and wanting to know and trying to make sure that they don't get so isolated they don't have anybody in their corner.
Mhm. Yeah, that's perfect. And I think, and you kind of touched on it earlier, oftentimes these folks are losing their parents or their loved ones twice. They're losing them
Yes.
once to the disease and then once when they pass. So it's a whole different set. And for me, I would say probably patience is huge. It's just remembering to be patient, center yourself before interacting, especially if you're a highly emotional person. Trying to look inward, especially when situations get heated. Just trying to be patient. Again, walk away if you need to walk away. In our settings, dealing with it on a community level, sometimes walking away and changing your shirt, putting your hair in a hat, little simple things like that. You come back and you're that person's best friend all of a sudden, whereas 10 minutes ago they were kicking you out of their room. So, this too shall pass. Another kind of great thing to keep in mind. And, unfortunately the progression is what it is and there's no cure for it. So, I like the advice of non-judgmental zone because, yeah, I mean, as horrible as it might be to say that, I wish they were gone already. It's completely normal to think that way because,
Mhm.
this individual is kind of already no longer with us in a sense. So, finding your tribe, being patient, definitely huge.
Agree with both of those being the top, definitely the top factors, and then adding into that, take care of themselves. Because oftentimes, especially the caregivers in the homes that, whether it's the husband, the wife, or the adult children, they're not taking care of themselves and they're ignoring their own issues, either because they are so depleted with stress or time, they're forgetting to take their medication, they're not doing their follow-up appointments. And then that's when a crisis really hits because now the individual living with the dementia diagnoses just lost their support system overnight. So that's, I would say, definitely your village because that's who's going to take control and help you when those times happen, whether you get hospitalized yourself or if you just need that mental break. And also that, we all have our villages now. We've got our friends, we've got our networks. We have a bad day. Our children were growing up. We called people and we said, "You're not going to believe what my kid did today." They need that opportunity and that sounding board to say, "Well, you're not going to believe what my mother just did."
Yeah.
She pulled her clothes off and ran down the street. I've never been so embarrassed. And if the person you're talking to's never dealt with dementia, they're thinking, "Oh my, what's going on at that house?" And there's the judgment that Kay talked about. It needs to be that sounding board. The person goes, "Oh yeah, well, my dad did that last week, but gosh, at least he had his underwear on. I guess I'm thankful." So and they have to learn to have a little bit of fun with the disease too, because it's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of fun moments there.
Mhm.
Absolutely. My dad, when he did not even recognize me, he was a young adult. And the last time I saw him was going in for a date with my mother. And he was not literally doing this, but he was imagining he was getting dressed for this date. He told me all about my mother. There were other stories along the way. There can be some wonderful moments in it. And for all the caregivers, anyone on this call who's a caregiver, thank you for what you do in taking care of people. It's a tough job, dementia or otherwise, and you are appreciated and cared about. I would mention that all of you, Michelle and Cory, do webinars. Kay does her webinars. We put them on our calendar at AgeWise. And yes, thank you, Cory. We have all kinds of other support and services on the site. So I hope you visit or call us when we can help connect you to people like Kay and Cory and Michelle, because nobody gets super rich in working with the aging.
Oh,
They make a living, but they're compassionate, caring, wonderful people. So thank you all.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you have a great afternoon, a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you next time.